Safe Harbor Foundation presents stories of hopelessness and hope, stories of addiction and courage. These are the true stories of real people fighting their battles, reclaiming their lives.
Okay, my name is Bryson. I'm an alcoholic. My most recent sobriety date is August 17, 2025. A little bit about myself. I was raised in a small city in southern West Virginia in McDowell County called Welch. A very prosperous coal mining community. My father was a Presbyterian minister. My mother was a surgical nurse. I was raised in a mostly not dysfunctional household. My parents were very caring and supportive, and I led in Welch until 1978 when we moved to Charleston what might be called an idyllic life. It was a very prosperous community. My father was the pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Welch, and he was a teacher all his life and not a preacher. He never preached at you, but he taught you, and he taught me. My mother was a surgical nurse at Stevens Clinic Hospital, now Stevens Center Federal Correctional Institution. I knew a lot of people from the hospital then, and I know a lot of people from the prison now, living in sober living. In 1978, we moved to Charleston, West Virginia, and I attended Lincoln Junior High School, home of the Kroger on the west side now, and Stonewall Jackson High School, right across the street from where we sit. I was an average student, didn't get much joy from school, but I got a lot of joy from my friends. Graduated from high school and initially went to Marshall University. Partied my way right out of Marshall and ended up, gladly so, at West Virginia State College, now university, and graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts in English in 1987. Went to work immediately upon leaving West Virginia State. I went to work as an investigator for the Attorney General's office. At the same time, waited tables. And to backtrack a little, I had been in the food business since I was 13 years old, running a snack bar at a pool, and at 15 flipping burgers at Burger Chef, and then at 18 waiting tables at Chi-Chi's and Red Lobster and other places, and bartending. And while I was working for very low pay at the Attorney General's office, I was also waiting tables and bartending. And then I took a position with Bob Evans Restaurant as an assistant manager and was eventually transferred to be the general manager of the Bob Evans in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I was from 1989 till 1997, and was very successful at my job. I got married when I was 18 and got divorced when I was 30, and life changed for me at that point, and I decided to go to culinary school and became an executive chef and have worked in the food business, in the chefing business up until 6 months ago when I finally had enough, and now I drive for Lyft and do exceptionally well and enjoy my work. And I'm staying sober for now. My history of addiction started with alcohol. I was 15, as is many people's story. Usually starts around 13, 14, 15. I went to a party. I hung out with older kids, and so I went to a party, and they were drinking beer and had some booze, some hard liquor, Black Velvet, if I remember properly, and I drank some of the beer, and then I started in on the liquor. Everybody was drinking, so I wanted to be part of the crowd. And these were 18-year-olds, and I drank the liquor, and it just made me feel different. It no longer was, I always had friends, but I always felt apart from. And given more time, I could tell you about how apart from I was, but we won't go into that right now. But I would say that I drank alcoholically from the first drink. I remember waking up and feeling pretty crappy, but I couldn't wait to do it again. And so the next weekend, same deal, same party, same people, began to drink again, once again on an alcoholic level. Drank till I passed out. And that continued for some time through my teens, but only on the weekend. And it didn't affect my school, but keep in mind I was still an average student. But when I graduated high school, it was still only a weekend thing. But when I went to Marshall, it became more of a every other day thing. And then when I moved into the fraternity house, Go Lambda Chi Alpha, it became a daily thing. And it was encouraged. The drinking, it was like in the fraternity system, you have a big brother and a little brother. And it was always, my little brother could drink more than your little brother. And I had to prove that I could drink more than anybody else. So on the daily, I was drinking every day. I was holding down a job. I had no problem partying all night and getting up the next day and going to class and going to work. So I was I wouldn't have called myself an alcoholic. Then in retrospect, I certainly was an alcoholic. But I was very functional. When I left Marshall and came to live with my father, it kind of tapered off a bit because I had great respect for my father, and I certainly wasn't going to drink in the house or anything like that. But I would go out on the weekends again, and even though it was a very social thing, my drinking was always around other people. It was always in a setting with a whole lot of people around, in a bar or a restaurant or any number of places, but it was never drinking alone. I wouldn't drink alone at that point. When I worked for the Attorney General's office, I had to keep up appearances, so my drinking was at happy hour at the bars, and then, on the weekends. I remember when I was waiting tables for Red Lobster, I would work very long shifts, and I had just graduated from college, so I was 21, and I would work these double shifts to where we'd have a couple of hours off between shifts. And in those days, Red Lobster was very close to the town center mall, and down the block there was a restaurant called Chili Willie's, and it's a Huntington-based restaurant, but it was a bar, and we would go, not just me, but other people, because I was always drinking with other people. We would go in between shifts and just get hammered and go back to work. Once again, functional alcoholic. So, that went on for many years. Now, in the 90s, when I got transferred to Myrtle Beach with Bob Evans, I was making a whole lot of money. I was married, and I discovered the benefits of cocaine in my daily life. It made me more gregarious. It made me, in my mind, more fun. Probably the people around me would differ with that. Certainly my ex-wife differed with that. So the 90s was fueled with weed, cocaine, and alcohol. Once again, though, it was always a group thing. It was not by myself. It was with other people. So it was fun. Then, for a short time, upon returning to Charleston, West Virginia in 2001, I was still doing cocaine. And I got divorced in 1993 because of my alcohol and drug addiction and the erratic behavior. In 2001, when I moved back to Charleston, I discovered that if you added baking soda and heat to cocaine, it made crack. And if I'd have known then what I know now, I would have bought stock in Arm & Hammer baking soda, because that was just a totally different high. But that's when I started isolating. I would buy crack cocaine and I would sit at home and smoke it and be paranoid. It really began to, and I'll tell you one thing that crack did, it put a halt on my drink because I wouldn't go out. I would sit at home and smoke crack. That lasted for about 8 months until people started to notice, and I was strongly encouraged to check myself into rehab. So my first stint in rehab was in late 2001, November of 2001. My original sobriety date, which I consider being drug-free, because and I know that NA will say that alcohol is a drug, and certainly it is, but as far as illegal drugs or drugs that didn't have my name on the bottle, my clean date of illicit drugs is November 17th of 2001. And I have been drug-free, this is not including alcohol, but drug-free coming up on 25 years. Very proud of that. But I continued to stay, I guess, what might be called California sober, because I continued to drink. Even though I wasn't doing the hard drugs, I was still... my first AA meeting was December 18, my birthday, in 2001. Same group that I attend religiously to this day, the Mustard Seed group at 7:30 a.m. here in Charleston. I met some wonderful people 25 years ago, or 24 years ago, who I am friends with today in that group. And at that time, I continued to stay illicit drug-free, but continued to drink. Maybe not to the level that I was drinking, but certainly to a high level, an alcoholic level. Even though I was going to meetings, I wasn't being honest with myself. And I certainly wasn't being honest with the people around me. So that continued, and when in about 2000, and I had periods of sobriety. I would have 2 years here, I would have a year here. But I'm a chronic relapser. I don't know how we can use the language here, but I'm going to use it. I'll get a case of the buckets and say, who'll know? What does it matter? And I'll go out and grab a pint of liquor. And the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous will tell you that once you take that first drink, the phenomenon of cravings begin. And once I've taken that first one, you don't stop me. I'm off to the races. But there were periods of time where I would get back into the AA way of life and quell it for a while. And then, a couple of years go by and I get a case of the efforts and start drinking again. In 2013, I decided that being on my own, I wasn't being very successful. And so I found a place called the Oxford House, which is, when run properly, is probably one of the best models for how to run a sober living home out there. And from 2013 to 2018, I lived in all three of the Oxford houses in the area here in Charleston and Dunbar. Held every office that you can have, president, treasurer, secretary, etc., that you can have in there, and stayed sober for 5 years. Decided that I was good to go. I got this, which is one of the phrases you look out for in trying to recover. I got this. So I went out on my own. Boredom is one of my big triggers. So I'm sitting there in my apartment one day, bored. I was working the whole time, but boredom being my trigger, I got a case of the efforts, and after 5 years decided to go out and drink again. I don't like to blame one thing on another thing. I'll just say my isolation drinking and my heavy drinking, and by heavy I mean I was drinking a half gallon of vodka every day. A half gallon, a handle of vodka every day after my father had passed away. Sitting there alone, being miserable. That got noticed, I don't know, probably took a year of that to get noticed, how serious it was. And so it was strongly suggested once again that I go to rehab this time. This time I went to Pinecrest in Huntington, that is a part of Prestera. Great organization. It was a great rehab. And if nothing else, because I had gained a lot of knowledge about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, or whatever 12-step program there is. I'd learned a lot about that. I had a lot of knowledge, and I'll tell you, with an alcoholic or an addict, a little or a lot of knowledge is a dangerous thing, because you can tell people what they want to hear. But I graduated from Pinecrest, and it wasn't too long before I relapsed again. Then went through another rehab and relapsed again. Then for 2 more times it would be go to detox. What are they going to teach me new at rehab? The only thing that rehab was doing is sequestered me from alcohol for 28 days. So finally, my last relapse happened in August of this year, and I have to do what they say. You know, I've never been a huge fan of all these pithy little catchphrases they use in AA and NA and so forth, but you got to play that tape through, because as long as I don't take the first drink, I'm fine. So I need to keep reminding myself that that first drink is going to lead to this, is going to lead to that. And I can tell you in my journey of recovery that it never gets better in relapse. Each relapse is worse than the previous. So this one, even though it was very short-lived, and my relapses tend to be short-lived. It might be a month, it might be 2 months. Never, it either gets caught or I catch it before it gets too terrible. But it's always worse the next time around. So this time I'm doing well. I'm living in sober living again with Safe Haven, and I've been on and off with Safe Haven for about 4 years. To say that they have saved my life would be an understatement. I have a lot of respect for everybody with the Safe Haven organization and the men in my house. You know, it's all about accountability, and to be able to be accountable, whether on my own or with other people helping hold me accountable. That's what leads to success for me. And now I feel like I have yet another chance. I just need to, as my dad's dad, my Daddy John, my grandfather, said, long as I can hold it in the road and not, stay within the guardrails and stay out of the ditches, I'll do well, and I'm looking forward to having great success this time. My advice would be to never think you've got this. A good friend of mine in the AA community, and it's kind of more of a visual thing, but he said, keep your cup in the center of the table. It is much less likely to tip over if it's firmly established in the center. Now, what does that mean? That means have a support system, strongly encouraged to get a sponsor, to attend meetings regularly. Do meetings keep me sober? No. Do they help? Yeah. I mean, I know for at least an hour a day, or however meetings, I go to about 10 meetings a week, but at least for that period of time, I'm not going to drink. I feel better afterwards. But the closer your cup gets to the edge of the table, which means you start distancing yourself from meetings, start not calling your sponsor, don't use the resources like Safe Haven that are available to you, your cup is more likely to fall off the table and you'll end up in relapse. The mental relapse happens long before the physical relapse happens. So be mindful every day. Get a higher power. Whether that's God or what, it says in Bill's story in the Big Book, when Ebby came by his house, he tells Bill W., choose a God of your understanding. Your God doesn't have to be the same as mine. I choose to believe in a loving, benevolent God. I used to believe in a scorekeeper God. You get a check mark in this column for doing good, you get an X mark in that column for doing bad, and whatever side weighs the better, is how well you're going to do at the pearly gates. Now, I don't believe in a scorekeeper God. I believe in a loving God that chooses to help me to stay sober. But your God doesn't have to be, your higher power doesn't have to be my higher power. I think that if you stay firmly involved in the recovery community, you have thousands of times more likely of a chance to stay clean and sober.
This has been a Safe Harbor Foundation podcast. This episode and others are available at safehavensoberhomes.com. If you know of someone who needs help with addiction, please call us at 304-853-3869 or visit us at safehavensoberhomes.com. Be well, people. We do recover.